The Graal's council chamber hummed with a subdued energy, the collective murmur of voices filling the vast hall as hundreds of representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy debated their next move. The chamber itself, a marvel of architectural ingenuity, arched high above them, its vaulted ceilings shimmering with an ambient blue light that pulsed in rhythm with the council's deliberations. Metallic walls, infused with a living alloy, subtly shifted and reflected the forms of the beings within, creating an eerie sense that the room was alive and watching. In the center of the room stood High Commander Thrax of the Zalvian Empire, his imposing figure dwarfing many of the beings around him. His 6 limbs moved with the grace of a predator as he addressed the assembly. His skin, a reflective surface resembling molten silver, glinted under the soft lights, making him appear almost celestial. When he spoke, his voice boomed, carrying the authority of one who had led countless campaigns across the galaxy. "The humans are a minor threat," he declared, his voice laced with disdain. "Their technology is laughably primitive, their fleets are scattered and outdated, and their planet is a sitting target. If we strike swiftly and decisively, Earth will fall within a single cycle." A ripple of agreement moved through the assembly, punctuated by the occasional hum of approval from delegates who possessed no vocal cords. The sentiment was clear. Most of them viewed humanity as nothing more than an insignificant species ripe for conquest. From a shadowed corner of the chamber came a loud, deliberate thump. The assembly grew quiet as heads turned toward the source of the noise. There, leaning heavily on a staff of dark wood adorned with silver filigree, stood Commander Thrax of the Ragnian Wormfolk. His once magnificent carapace, now dulled with age and scarred from countless battles, bore the unmistakable marks of a warrior who had seen more than most could imagine. His presence alone was enough to command respect, even from those who dismissed his words. "You fools," he rasped, his voice a harsh contrast to Thrax's polished tones. "You think humans are weak because their technology lags behind ours. You see their crude ships and their chaotic societies and believe they are no match for the might of this alliance. But technology alone does not win wars." Thrax's eyes narrowed, his silvery surface seeming to ripple with irritation. "And what do you base this warning on, old one? Stories? Rumors spread by traitors and scouts too frightened to face an unknown enemy?" Thrax straightened, his ancient frame creaking with the effort. From the folds of his cloak he produced a small device, its surface glowing faintly. With a flick of his clawed hand, he activated it, projecting a holographic display that filled the room with a haunting montage of images and recordings. The council watched in stunned silence as the projection unfolded. It showed warships obliterated in flashes of light, entire fleets reduced to floating debris. Scenes of human history played out before them. Bloody battles fought with terrifying savagery, nuclear explosions that turned cities into ash, and the relentless march of armies that seemed to thrive on chaos and destruction. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the humans fought with a ferocity that defied comprehension. "I fought them," Thrax said, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. 40 years ago, when the Ragnian Wormfolk encountered their kind at the edge of the Spiral Arm. My fleet outnumbered them 10 to 1. Their ships were held together with scrap metal and hope. Their weapons barely pierced our shields, and yet they annihilated us. Not because they were stronger, not because they were smarter, but because they fought like demons. They fought as if they had nothing to lose, and when they were done with us, they left nothing behind but wreckage and silence." The images faded, leaving the chamber bathed in an uneasy stillness. Thrax's sneer returned, though it lacked the confidence it had carried earlier. "You expect us to believe that a handful of primitive savages defeated your fleet? Perhaps the fault lies with your leadership, old one, not with the strength of your enemy." A low growl emanated from Thrax, But he did not rise to the bait. Instead, he gestured to the council. "You sit here in your arrogance, secure in the belief that your advanced technology makes you invincible. But humans do not fight like us. They do not follow the rules of war. They will use their planet itself as a weapon if it means victory. They will turn it into a graveyard before they surrender it to you. If you attack Earth, you will regret it." The chamber erupted into chaos, with voices shouting over one another. Some called for caution, their instincts attuned to the wisdom in Vraktis's words. Others, like Trathok, dismissed him as a relic of a bygone era, his mind clouded by the trauma of defeat. When the vote was cast, the decision was clear. The invasion would proceed. The combined might of the Grolk's alliance would descend upon Earth, and humanity would be brought to its knees. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Trathok approached Thrax, his silvery form towering over the old warrior. "You speak of regret, Thrax," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But it is not we who will regret this decision. It is you, for failing to see the opportunity before you. Humanity will be crushed under the weight of our power, and when it is done, your name will be forgotten, just like the species you so fear." Thrax said nothing as Trathok turned and strode away, but deep within his scarred chest, a sense of foreboding settled like a heavy stone. He had done all he could to warn them. Now, all that remained was to watch the tragedy unfold. Thrax watched the unfolding chaos from the observation deck of the Council's command vessel, far from the carnage near Earth. The ship's vast viewport offered a panoramic view of the battle, and despite the considerable distance, the destruction was clear. The once proud fleet of the Grolk's alliance, hailed as the most powerful force in the known galaxy, was crumbling. Flames and debris filled the void as alliance ships were picked apart, not by overwhelming firepower, but by relentless ingenuity and the unyielding savagery of humanity. He leaned heavily on his staff, his old joints aching as he stood in the artificial gravity. Around him, council aides and officers bustled in panic, their normally composed demeanor shattered by the unprecedented losses. Emergency broadcasts and desperate distress signals filled the air, creating a cacophony of despair. For Thrax, it was a scene that he had anticipated, dreaded, and tried to prevent. Yet, his warnings had fallen on deaf ears. High Counselor Jelthar, a serpentine being with emerald scales that shimmered in agitation, turned to Thrax, her usually poised voice trembling. "You knew this would happen. You tried to tell us. Why didn't we listen?" Vrutkin regarded her with tired eyes, his voice carrying the weight of decades of war. "Because arrogance blinds the mighty. You all thought yourselves untouchable, convinced that humanity's apparent weaknesses made them easy prey. But war is not about who has the better ships or the strongest shields. It's about who wants to win more. And the humans, they fight like their very existence depends on it. Because it does." Jeltha recoiled slightly at his words, her serpentine coils tightening in discomfort. "Surely there's still something we can do. A retreat, perhaps? We could regroup and—" "Retreat?" Thrax let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and broken. "The humans won't allow it. Not now. You've attacked their home, destroyed their cities, killed their people. You think they'll let you escape and lick your wounds? No. They'll hunt you to the ends of the galaxy. To them, this isn't just war. It's personal." As if to underscore his point, a new series of explosions lit up the viewport. A human ship, an ungainly-looking construct that seemed to defy the principles of aerodynamics, had rammed one of the Alliance's dreadnoughts. The human vassal detonated on impact, vaporizing itself and taking the dreadnought with it. It was a brutal, suicidal tactic, but it worked. Thrax could imagine the humans aboard that ship, sacrificing themselves without hesitation, their minds focused solely on vengeance. The council chamber was in disarray. Holographic displays projected the battlefield in gruesome detail, showing the annihilation of Alliance forces in real time. Fleet commanders called in frantic reports, their voices choked with fear. The humans had turned the tide. Their ground forces, though outnumbered, had begun to push back the invaders, employing tactics that no amount of technology could counter. Guerrilla strikes, sabotage, and relentless ambushes turned every engagement into a bloodbath. Above their orbital defenses, systems once thought obsolete continued to wreak havoc, augmented by improvised weaponry that outsmarted the Alliance's advanced countermeasures. "Commander Thrax has fallen," an officer reported, their voice hollow. "The Apex Star has been destroyed. No survivors." Thrax closed his eyes for a moment, bowing his head. He had no love for Thrax, but the loss was monumental. With the High Commander gone, the fleet was leaderless, its cohesion unraveling with every passing second. A deep, guttural growl escaped Jelthar's throat. "This is unacceptable. We are the Galactic Alliance. How could a backwater species do this to us?" Thrax turned to her, his expression hard. "You underestimated them. You saw their fractured world, their crude machines, and their history of conflict, and you thought it meant they were weak. But humans are not weak. They are forged by their chaos, tempered by their struggles. Every war they've fought has taught them to adapt, to survive, to thrive in the face of annihilation. They don't fear death like we do. To them, it's just another part of the fight." Jelthar stared at him, her eyes narrowing. "You speak of them as if they are more than us. They are still a primitive species, barely crawling out of their gravity well." "Primitive?" Thrax said, his voice rising. "Tell me, Counselor, which of our species would sacrifice an entire fleet just to draw an enemy into a trap? Which of us would rig their own satellites to become weapons? Which of us would fight to the last breath, with nothing but improvised explosives and raw determination? Primitive? No. They are something else entirely. Something the galaxy has never seen before." Before Jelthar could respond, a sharp alarm cut through the air. One of the junior officers turned to the council with a pale expression. "We've detected human ships approaching our position, fast-moving, low-profile. They've evaded our early warning systems." Jelthar's coils tightened in panic. "How is that possible? This ship is stationed well outside the combat zone." Thrax felt a cold dread settle in his chest. "You've made yourselves their enemy," he said quietly. "You've struck at their home. Did you really think you'd be safe even here?" The ship's shields activated and defensive batteries began firing at the incoming vessels. The humans' ships were smaller, less advanced, but their movements were erratic and unpredictable. They weaved through the hail of energy blasts with precision, closing the distance at an alarming speed. Thrax moved to the viewport, gripping his staff tightly as he watched the human ships break through the defensive perimeter. Explosions rocked the command vessel, and the lights flickered. The humans were targeting critical systems, disabling the ship piece by piece. He could almost hear their battle cries, feel their fury as they pressed their attack. "Prepare the escape pods," Jelthar hissed, her voice trembling. "We must retreat." "And where will you go?" Thrax asked, turning to her. "There's nowhere in this galaxy where you'll be safe. The humans will find you, no matter how far you run." Another explosion tore through the ship, and the floor beneath them shuddered violently. Smoke began to fill the chamber and alarms blared. Thrax turned back to the viewport, watching as the humans pressed their advantage. They were relentless, unstoppable. He thought of the warnings he had given, the pleas for caution that had gone unheeded. He had tried to make them understand, to convey the true nature of humanity. But the Council's arrogance had been their undoing. Now, the Galactic Alliance was paying the price. As the ship's systems failed one by one and the humans closed in, Thrax felt a strange sense of calm. He had seen this before, decades ago, when his own fleet had faced humanity and been destroyed. He had survived then, but only by chance. This time, he knew there would be no escape. In the final moments, as fire consumed the command vessel and the Council's panicked cries were silenced, Vractus whispered to himself, his voice barely audible above the chaos. I told them. I warned them, but they refused to see. Now they will learn what it means to face the wrath of humanity. As the ship disintegrated around him, Vractus closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Somewhere far below, on the surface of Earth, humanity stood triumphant, their defiance etched into the ruins of their cities and the shattered remains of their enemies. The galaxy would never forget what had happened here. It would serve as a warning, a lesson, and a reminder of the one truth Vractus had known all along. Humans were not to be underestimated.